the gates of hell, the black stairs to nothingness, the cosmologies of madness, the books of Eden. The books of Eden have been a staple in Alpha Tale for many, many years. They are some of, if not the most recognizable pieces of Alpha Tale's lore, other than, like, let's say, like, the Alphaverse or Alpha Tale itself, even. There are many, many knowledgeable and well-rounded beings in these books, featuring not only in stories such as the Passion Collection, but in the main storyline we get to see these beings in action through tales and the mythos, from documentaries, and plenty of other notable sources of information about these books. So far, there is only 4 notable books that are known to exist currently. 5 technically, but mainly 4. There is the Book of Hearts, the Book of Eyes, the Book of Souls, and of course, the Book of Minds. These 4 books formulate 4 whole different cosmologies and 4 whole different lines of fiction for the entirety of the verse of Alpha Tale. They act basically as their own gateways into their own worlds. They have their own stories, they have their own myths, their own legends, their own heroes, their own villains, X, Y, and Z, you know the gist. These things, however, are not filled with regular old warriors like you would see in Eden, or they're not filled with tragic heroines like you would see in Genosha, which is Reality 6, our main place that the main story of Alpha Tale takes place in a lot of the time. The things you find here are more in the realm of Bloodborne or the Cthulhu Mythos-esque sort of areas. You will find incomprehensible beings, you will find eldritch lords, you will find unfathomable horrors beyond your imagination that lie within these places. We know just enough information to make a video like this work, and we know just enough information to where I can give you guys a taste, a dip into the lore and the story of these books, and hopefully from then on it will perhaps give you more incentive to do further digging, see about if there are any other connections that can be formed from these books, and of course see about the possibility of, well, if you would like more information and more knowledge on them, I am more, of course, willing to do that as well at some point. But for now, let's go ahead and get into the lore of the Books of Eden. Alpha Tale Mythos Explained. So I think the most notable thing for us to start with is to start at the beginning. Where did these beings come from? What's their origin? What created them or brought them into existence, bred them, all the, creational synonyms and terms. And of course, what do they specifically do? This part of the video is going to act more like a physiology, history-esque kind of thing. So, if you already are pretty familiar on that sort of thing, then feel free to skip past this part. I'll leave a little thing for it in the description below on where the rest of the lore and lore stuff goes on. But this is just talking about how they came to be and what they are in a sense. So you already know what to do. So the only way to get started with this video, I believe, is to talk about pretty much where all eldritch entities come from. At least a good majority of them. I'd say about like 90 to 99% of all eldritch beings come from this. So let's talk a little bit, not delve into it completely because that's a different video on its own, talk about the cosmic essence. Probably the most recognizable source of power, or definitely one of the two most recognizable of the two sources of power that encapsulate this world. The cosmic essence is the thing that fuels basically all eldritch beings. Like I said, a good majority of them, not all of them, are fueled by it, as there has been stated to be some eldritch beings that do not rely on the cosmic essence and rely on something else or just themselves. But the cosmic essence fuels 90 to 99% of all eldritch beings that exist within the verse of Alpha Tale. Period. Done deal. It is as it is. It gives them power, it gives them existence, it gives them life, it gives them thought. Everything that you can think of that a high god, high level creature would need in this world to do the things that you would see like Malice Grow, 404, or hell, even Soul to be capable to do. This is where all that stems from. The cosmic essence isn't just power itself. It is thought. It is existence. It is life. It also is death for these entities. When they die, they return back to this source. When they are formed into existence, they start out as insignificant thoughts. What's a good way to put it, I suppose, would be to compare it to a water drop being compared to the sea. When an eldritch entity will as an example, Malice Grow is a literal water droplet, and even then, that's understating the cosmic essence power all in itself. But we're gonna go with that example. Malice Grow is a water droplet in comparison to the rest of the cosmic essence itself that is comparable to our ever-expanding universe itself. That's the comparison. That's the best comparison that I can give you that makes the most logical sense in terms of the sheer difference between Malice Grow's cosmic essence and the cosmic essence itself. The cosmic essence is much more different than code, where everything's logical. 1 + 1 = 2. The square root of pi, M theory, X theory, whatever it is. All those graphical, geometrical, algebraic terms that all really exist in the code, the nexus, which we can get to in another video when we talk more about the Alphaverse. But the cosmic essence is everything flimsical. It's everything that just can't be measured, can't be determined, is up to quote unquote fate, basically. I mean, it is technically fate as well, as it has been stated multiple times that the cosmic essence can determine, bend, and create the fates of others to its own whim and will. And it's not like it's an unconscious thing it does. I mean, it definitely can operate unconsciously, as we know the cosmic essence and the Nexus both share a collective unconsciousness with all their creations throughout the entirety of the verse. Everything that relies on them, that is, or they create. But they also have a consciousness as well, amongst themselves as well. The cosmic essence isn't exactly, as I put it, it's not a mother. It's more like, you can compare it to a mother or father, but it's more just like a source. It's a source, as I stated previously before. Just where everything comes from at the end of the day. I don't think there's any much more to say on the matter than that. A full cosmic essence video, or talking about the sources video, will probably go way more in depth into the cosmic essence and Nexus than this video does. But this is where beings come from. This is the cosmic essence, basically, at its surface level. This is where it all stems from. Beings, in a sense, can be considered to be not like genies, but they have aspects of a genie-esque sort of like powers, to where they can do whatever they so choose. Since they come from the cosmic essence, and the cosmic essence, can do anything as well, these beings who are able to harness this power of cosmic energy, cosmic essence, are also capable to do just about anything they so wish, though not to the same degree as the cosmic essence itself or higher beings that have more cosmic essence in them. Which is why beings, in a sense, always devour each other or form congregations or cults that give a singular entity that they aspire or look up to more cosmic energy. Because once you are born with cosmic power, that's basically, that's all that you kind of have at that time. You can, in fact, passively get more, but the amount that you normally are created with is what you naturally have. They do, however, have entities. A good majority of the more mature ones often are said to be basically infinite pools of cosmic energy, just never to the same level of infinity as the cosmic essence itself. Beings similar to that of the Cthulhu mythos don't have a stagnant physical form. They have a form that they will take occasionally, more often than others, but beings and all eldritch abominations within the verse can always be whatever they so want. We've seen tons of beings before throughout the stretch of the novel and side novels and even the mini stories change their shape from one thing to another based on just how they're feeling or what they want to be at one point or another. Cosmic beings never usually tend to stay as one singular thing at most times. Alright, with that being said, now let's go ahead and get ourselves into the different levels of beings and cosmic entities you will likely come across as you read and just overall look through the story of Alpha Tale and to Eden and beyond. Now, there is a threat level list of beings and how dangerous they can be from this level to other levels. Now, this is mainly for beings such as, the ones that roam in the Transvoid, but it's still very viable and usable for beings in other books as well, even though other books tend to be on a more higher scale in terms of power. It's still usable, however, because the list or the rating also talks about, it doesn't just talk about immediate, oh, they're very powerful. No, it talks about their position in things, if they're kind, if they're malicious, that kind of thing. So that's why it's still somewhat usable. So let's go ahead and get right into that and talk about the first tier on the list, which is white. White threat level beings are basically friendly. They try to usually stop other bad deeds from going on. They have a range of power, of course, but usually enough they want to help you and try to save you from certain things that may be going on. Their biggest priority tends to be oftentimes enough helping others. This is where you'll have your Yesmirians and your Hemsworths at. Those kinds of beings that go out of their way to help people and make sure everyone's all right. As I said, they range in power. Hemsworth and Yesmirian may be weak, but their range in power, from Hemsworth being omniscient and Yesmirian being omnipresent, already lets you know basically that even the white tier entities can still be a bit of a problem from time to time. Next up, we have the red tier entities. These are your these are your minds of menses. These are beings that normally can't move, can't do anything on their own, and just kind of are stationary. Doesn't mean they can't do any damage to you psychically or telepathically. It just means that overall they are pretty much immobile, or even if they aren't immobile, they have such a low level of intelligence that they basically can't do naught at all, basically. So you're probably thinking of things like the Hyperwolf, which is oftentimes considered to be basically just this thing that sleeps and does nothing all the time. Like I said before, you're looking at your minds of menses, who are entities that tend to need other people to move them around, tend to travel around with them, or basically just kind of quarantine them off from everybody else because they're not really doing much of anything. You could even consider the first breeding mother of the transvoid, the one that fell into the depths of the transvoid itself, to be a red tier entity because of the fact that it can't go anywhere and it's basically stationary for like all of eternity. You can kind of consider that to also be one as well if you kind of get into the specifics of it. The next tier beings are blue tier entities. These are your telepaths and your telekinesis based entities, though sometimes they can also do a little bit more than that, but these are specifically them. You're probably looking at, let me think. Yes. The perfect example for this one, and I can't think of anyone else, is Universma, also known as Another Sans from the Alphaverse. He's considerably a blue tier entity. Its attacks mainly based in telepathy and telekinesis, to where it can affect the mind, as we saw in the, I believe, Puppet Book 3. In the Puppet Book 3 chapters, it took out 404 instantly via a telepathic attack that basically just like dropped him in seconds. Universma would be considered a blue tier level entity. And just before you say like, oh, was that making pretty weak? No, the blue tier entities are capable of being universal to even multiversal level threats. And that's mainly their range, universal to multiversal levels of strength. They of course can be stronger, but they, just like white tier entities, don't really tend to be aggressive or have malicious intent. There are opportunities where you can find some like that, but it's not very frequent, and you're probably unlikely to see it all too often. But that is blue tier entities. And now we're going to get into the higher tiers. These are your yellows, your oranges, and black tier level entities. All beings past this point are basically unattachable, not unattachable. Apologies. They are basically unsympathizable. You cannot sympathize with these things, then they do not sympathize with you. They're most likely stronger than your alphas, your 404s. They're much more powerful than probably your loadings, J404s, and all that other stuff. These are the high tier beings that have long since consumed their patch of cosmic essence and are very much in those upper echelons of insane, incredible power, can consume all of R6 if they so please to, basically. So let's get right into it with the first tier of the later half of the list. So the first point on the list is yellow. These are your beings that are capable of burning down entire worlds. These entities you can consider to be ones such as Farron Gold or Avalon are considerably noted to be yellow tier level entities. Beings that, of course, just like the other tiers, you can be more powerful in other tiers than just these. But the tier does specifically state that, they're usually going around burning shit down, usually going around destroying entire timelines, worlds, realities. Everything basically is their oyster cake. Now, obviously, realities isn't entirely something that yellow entities tend to usually dabble in. I don't believe we have a yellow tier entity that's ever destroyed a reality before, but we definitely have one, such as Avalon, who is predicted and stated to be eventually at one point get so hot that he may, in fact, when he explodes, destroy everything in his reality, the Transvoid, their Eden Orb, and beyond that. But we're not going into too far into that. But that is a theory and talk around the Transvoid, and even in other worlds, that Avalon could potentially be the end of everything. The next tier we're going to focus on is, next up is the orange tier. These are your malwares, these are your malice grows, your apothipicas, and beings that basically use time and reality as a plaything. They care nothing for anybody's life, nothing for the preservation of the balance of life and death, destruction and creation. Whatever they want to do, they will do it. No hesitation, no remorse, no debate. So beings, as I've said before, who are often contended to be on this level, or at least are also stated to eventually be on this level, you are looking at characters like Malice Grow and Malware, just to give two basic examples that are familiar to every people. Malice Grow and Malware being entities that are capable of destroying not just time itself and space itself, but being capable of even annihilating the super concepts of those very things as well. If you want, you don't know what super concepts are, recommend checking out the wiki, or I'll just, drop something down below on what they are beneath the images I place here. But these are beings who are capable of basically annihilating entire multiverses. Hyperverses are also known as just hues, Hues, by the way, that's how you say it. They are immense level threats. These are world enders, fiction annihilators, story ceasers. They have basically no limits to the amount of destruction they can dish out. Like, it is insurmountable and damn near unfathomable the damage that these guys can in fact do to your worlds and so on. They're said to be beings that you should stay very far away from, which is viable via what they can do. And I believe, the next one on our list is none other than, this is the Black Tier. Now, this is where we get into the crazy shit when it comes to beings. Black Tier level beings, or at least on the threat list, are hue to hyperverse levels of dangerous. Now, to be fair, when I say like hyperverse, I usually am talking mainly about that they are dangerous to the things within their world. So we're using like the Transvoid, Book of Minds, Book of Souls, X sort of thing. They're dangerous to those aspects within their world, their cosmologies. Because if we compare it to Genosha or Reality 6, then they get significantly dumbed down in terms of their threat level. But when we compare it to what they can do in their worlds, then their threat level is greatly, infinitely increased. In the Black Tier list, you are looking at your Zarlas, the Archangels or Archer Angels, whichever you prefer to say. Archangels? I don't believe she's Archer Angel. Might be just like a. Hold on. I believe she is a Zarla Archangel is how she is called. So I had to check that out real quick. Zarla, the Archangel, and Gabriel, the Demon Lord. These guys are capable of just actually just decimating their cosmologies and their worlds pretty damn easily. You're also probably looking at beings such as we'll say the one in red, to be specifically, is someone also very dangerous as well. You're looking at someone like the Herald, people like the Pale Angel as well. People who can dish out heavy damage to the worlds they exist in as well. Those later beings from the Book of Mind. We'll get into that later on. The beings in the Black Tier list usually are those that have their own groups, they have their own cults, they have their own factions. You don't have to ever really consider them to be these wandering around threats, except for maybe a few, such as, the one in red and the Pale Angel. They don't have any cults, don't have any, subjects that matter. They might work for somebody, the Pale Angel, working with the eldest son of Cain is a good example, or the one in red, who tends to do business with Eden and its armies, is another example as well. But usually, like Gabriel or Zarla, they will often formulate their own faction, and just like I stated way back in the past, they will use that to get more cosmic essence, because beings will see them as exemplary or perfection incarnate and want to give more themselves so they can be with what they would perceive to be the closest possible thing to being the cosmic essence in terms of great greatness and might and power. But there is still one more tier left. It's not so much a tier as it is basically just like, these are the ones you don't ever want to fuck with. And this tier is none other than the unnameable race. Now, the unnamables are very much just really a trans void centered being, but if we take the threat list here, that they are beyond the scope and power of black tier entities, we can also relate it to other familiar entities as well, which I'll name drop here in a second. The unnameable race entities are beings who basically, they make up existence. They make up reality, they make up space, they make up time, they make up thought, they make up the void between those thoughts and the things that, and basically the void of which they come into existence through. Unnamables are a race of beings that quite literally feed on the emptiness between fiction and space itself. Basically, they devour things that don't exist quite yet. They literally thrive on the cusp of nothingness and between creation itself. They have no home, they have no identity, they have no form. They are unnamables because, one, they're basically indescribable, which is kind of like a little tease towards one of H.P. Lovecraft's novels, but going further ahead, they have no names because they're indescribable. They don't have a form designated to them because, as being unnamables, they tend to be just a mixture of a whole bunch of things shambled up into one thing. Usually whatever they eat or devour ends up becoming a part of their mass. If you've ever seen an image of soul, that's a good way to describe excuse me, I almost burped there. Describe an unnamable. If you ever kind of saw one, they're in that H.P. Lovecraft levels of, if you witness them, they will drive you mad instantly. Your eyes will pop out of your socket. The blood, the orifices in your face will leak out fluids all fluids in your body like you're a waterfall, essentially. There is no escaping unnamables once they get their eyes or, their whatever they stare upon you upon you, basically. Some good examples of beings like this is Soul, the Inspiration, and you could put Carvajal in that list as well. Though he is not from a book, he would be considered a being, basically an onlooker, something else from outside of this world. We're not going to talk too much about Carvajal, and I reckon that is a video on its own about the Fakir species, or the Xenos, so we're not going to talk too much about him anymore. We can talk about the Inspiration and Soul. Soul and the Inspiration are basically onlookers into their respective fictions themselves. Soul does not exist in Reality 6, does not exist in the Trans Void. He pretty much exists nowhere other than his own realm that exists outside of these stories, outside of these fragments, these tales, these myths, etc. Does not exist in their line of fiction because he devours things outside of that. He is everything outside of that, basically. The same thing goes for the Inspiration as well. Very massive, more than massive actually, just like beyond the scope of size and measurement itself. Is an onlooker into the entire Eden sphere itself. Has devoured it, I believe, once before, and is basically just like Soul. He doesn't devour anything. He's just like an onlooker. He slowly, on its own, gets stronger immensely on his own. And the gap between the Inspiration and Soul is massive. There's no comparison between the two, but they both serve the same function for the tier list. Hence, I am putting them in that category with one another as well. But that was the threat list of beings. We went all the way from the innocent, harmless ones that want to help you, such as Hemsworth and Yasmirian, all the way over to those that could do the most damage or basically just run your story itself, such as Soul and the Inspiration itself. And with the tier list out of the way, we can kind of get into some of the history of beings themselves and how they came to be. Now, to be frank, beings, at least in some aspect, usually tend to have come from one breeding mother. If you don't know what a breeding mother is, I'll tell you right now. A breeding mother is usually a singular entity or cosmic entity that gives birth, or is able to replicate the function of the cosmic essence in being able to create immensely powerful cosmic beings who have the power to basically surpass, maybe even surpass the scopes and scales of previously established beings on their own. A good example of this one is Kim. Hold on, I have her name here somewhere. I am probably gonna botch this, but I think I've said it before. Kim Ono Forlosa. That is Kim Ono Forlosa is a high level, one of the higher tier level beings, one of the five higher, not beings, breeding mothers in the verse, and quite literally is the mother of the conduit of change. That's one of the beings that it brought into existence. And if you know how powerful Alpha gets throughout the series, then you know that the fact that it's able to breed something like that already lets you know that breeding mothers can in fact make beings and entities that far exceed even their own scope and power casually. It's absolutely insane. It's basically like a gambling game that they play in their own stomachs or wombs or so on. All the different books have their own different origins in a sense. Not all of them, of course, but most of them tend to have had their own origin, such as the Book of Minds that was created by the one in red. I believe he also created some of the other ones. I believe he created souls and hearts as well. I believe that to be a fact. I'm gonna have to check that one out. If I ever get any lore in here semi-wrong, don't be afraid to correct me in the comments below. But I am 99% sure that the one in red is the creator behind the Book of Minds, the Book of Souls, and the Book of Hearts. But the Book of Eyes was created by itself, by its own creators, and has its own precursor entities, which were beings known as greater beings that existed at the base of the Eden tree. Long before the Eden tree began to completely form, those beings were there. The greater beings existed there. And I believe they also fed on the aspect of nothingness and existence itself. Hold on. Give me 1 second. They were called greater beings. They were the precursors and ancestors of beings of the transvoid, of course. They had a narrative realm or native realm that they existed from, whichever one I suppose you take from, that they used to exist from before Eden came around. I believe they destroyed or devoured their realm itself casually. They didn't do it on purpose. It was just because of who they were. Just like transvoid entities, which I guess I forgot that fact, but I'm gonna say it now. Transvoid entities are very different from one another. I mean, all beings are vastly different from one another. That goes for all Eldritch beings. Each of them is more different than the last, and you wouldn't tell they're from the same species unless you had looked back previously beforehand. I believe the only entities that you can tell are from the same species are demons and angels. The only two things that you can tell from the same species. Every other entity, every other being looks so different, yet there is no other version of them that exists out there. Malice Grove, nothing else like it exists out there. The Hyperwolf, nothing else exists like that out there. You have to quite literally kind of guess, figure out, what the hell, what's going on, why does everything look so differently? But we're gonna get into some of the lore here for the Book of Eyes. So let's go ahead and get that going real quick. Give me 1 second. So this video is already incredibly massively long, so I am not going to I'm not gonna sugarcoat nothing. We're gonna keep go. I'm just gonna read it right off the page, since everything on there is basically has not changed, is still the same, and doesn't really make much sense for me not to kind of go over it already. Not all books are gonna have like massive lore spiels, definitely not. But I am going to go into some of the lore for each of them and how they kind of semi-function. So I guess you can definitely expect this video to be possibly an hour, if not an hour and a half long. But let's get right into it. Story time for the Transvoid and the beings that existed within there. Okay, ready? By the way, if you already know that lore, just go ahead and skip past this, and we'll probably get into things like certain beings, their history, how they affected certain areas of their world, and X, Y, and Z, closing out statements of it. But this is the more history-based stuff for it. So prepare yourself. Story time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, you had your chance. Let's get into it. Long before the Transvoid was connected to the Book of Eyes, an entity known as Only the Host was said to have created all the planets, universes, and structures alike, along with gifting the Transvoid its own concept of space, time, logic, laws, and more. Formally addressing them as super concepts, as they were, ones that went beyond the limitations of the basic ones that the coded realities, such as Genosha and Reality 6, had, to where even basic ones such as light would be able to traverse entire realities, and is known widely as being responsible for the Transvoid's birth. After it was done, the host suddenly disappeared. Some say he died, while others believe he fell to the darkest part of the Transvoid with no way to return, and others theorize that he might have been killed. Eons would pass until the first breeding mother would be born and give birth to the first plague of beings. They were born without names and wouldn't have them for much longer. The beings were relentless and killed everything and consumed more. Soon, however, the breeding mother would grow worrisome of her children, destroying everything. So in response, she birthed an angel to take care of them, the first of many to purge the beings due to their negligence. The angel slaughtered the beings, and soon would be the first and last angel. The breeding mother would then give birth to a whole new horde of beings that, in hopes that this batch be better than the first. Once the last breeding mother passed away, beings came to be the norm, as millions upon millions filled the Transvoid. But due to the lack of a ruler, the angels put themselves on top of everyone and made it known they deserved respect, and if not given it, they would slaughter beings by the thousands. Beings became oppressed by the angels and were forced to follow their every whim and demand, many even being forced to breed with angels. Of course, only the best were allowed such a privilege, however. During the angels' rule, right under their nose was growing one of the many big families of the Transvoid, the Squid family. It was a small being known as Malus Grow who began to form and breed with a human-like being from a stray planet and form a large family, and as it grew, so did their knowledge, and soon found themselves ascending to higher planes of power where even all universes would mean nothing before them. The eldest of the Squid family would go on to start their own branches, while the youngest would remain close to their father. Once the angels grew wind of the Squid family, they wiped out as many as they could, even killing the mother and banishing one of the eldest children away in a different world entirely. Malus Grow, since that day, has been trying to reach the level of an unnameable. After a horrible couple of years went by before the well-known demon horde was born, they were said to have been caused and formed due to nature trying to balance itself out, basically. But one thing is for sure, though, and that is that two demons were born during that time and completely demolished the control the angels had over the Transvoid. Those two beings being none other than Gabriel and Helatori. And once they got their armies together, they would take back the Transvoid, almost like, not instantly, but it would be a hell of a battle for sure. And something that the story here doesn't really say is just how much of an absolute, not wash, but just how unprepared the angels were for a demon upscourge. Because the demons, for the longest time, while the angels were out doing their thing, didn't have any real lords or leaders. Sure, they may have had people that were pretty strong and rather powerful, but Helatori and Gabriel are considered, to be up there in the black tier levels of beings. So when they got around to when Helatori and Gabriel were eventually born or created, I would assume from a mass conglomeration of demons feeding into a hell pit so that they can formulate some kind of lords to aid them in their conflict. It was basically like a whoa, what the fuck's going on kind of deal with the angels, because I believe at the time they did in fact have a leader. I may be skipping ahead, though I am entirely not sure. Yes, that's exactly right. In the same story, as it reads here, the angels were pushed back and were forced to hide away while the transvoid flourished and became populated with cosmic beings of all sorts. During the while, a new angel would be born, and right after their birth, they would claim leadership of the angels as their new leader, and that was none other than Zarla. So yeah, just like the demons, these two factions were basically fighting each other without no proper heads to lead them both. So Zarla eventually would also come around to being formulated as well. And just like as I stated previously in the explanation here, beings can just they can be formed out of nothingness in a sense. They can come to exist randomly, kind of pop like popcorn in the sense, if that makes any sense. The history here doesn't really say it, but they went to another war right after this. Once the demons had their two lords, and once the heavens in the transvoid got theirs, they would go to war right after this. I believe during this time Gabriel had a wife, or had one of his wives. I believe he had a singular wife at the time. I'm not too sure, but he had a wife at the time, to which Zarla would make an example of by basically burning her at the stake and leaving her charred corpse at the gates of heaven itself as a reminder to Gabriel to basically just keep to your own shit, otherwise we will fuck you up, is exactly, I would assume was the message being sent there for sure. Of course, Gabriel and Helatori were having none of that shit, and so they immediately just went straight back to fighting. I believe to this day, even when you go back to the current storylines that exist in AT, or not the current storylines, but the ones that were happening in the main storyline, even they're still fighting each other. The battle between them hasn't ceased at all. Excuse me, we need to burp there. Helatori and Gabriel, as powerful as they are, Zarla is still an angel, which again will be a whole other video on its own on demonology and angelology in the Alphaverse, or in the Edenverse, I guess in a sense, or in the verse itself, which, by the way, has its own explanations, by the way, as well. His indication of the verse wasn't big enough as it is. It goes into demonology and angelology as well. So that is also something we will cover later on. But just to get some more tidbits on here, the war between the angels and demons continued to fester for eternities, whole eternities. Every time the cycle came to end, which again I'm not going to go too into the cycle because that's a whole other Mythos explanation video on its own, which could probably be tied into the conduit, but I might just make it its own thing. We'll see what happens. These guys continue to fight for all eternity. Usually when the cycle ends, it abruptly kind of comes back to a certain point in time where things were at a certain norm. Maybe it goes back to where, maybe say one key event happened already beforehand. It's quite the sparking change. But one thing is for certain though, it doesn't go all the way back. It doesn't, it no longer does that. It at one point started to, basically start itself back up after or before a key event took place. And usually it had to depend on if a key event had already transpired, or the death and tribulations of that key event that made it so that the cycle didn't just rewind all of the time. But after all that, that bit of a lore drop right there. But to give emphasis to the demon and angel war, every time the cycle restarts, they are right back to fighting. There is no going back before this war started. This event, their war, is so damning, is so in touch with the Transvoid's history. It is something that the cycle will always revert them back to. Doesn't matter how long it goes on. Doesn't matter what other events happen. If that war's still going on, which, as I said before, it goes on for eternities, entire eternities. Our universe, IRL, could expand for eons and eons. Could go through entire millennia's worth of cosmic events, and it will still be less significant than the events that transpired in the universe of the Transvoid between the two demon lords and the Archangel Zarla themselves. But that's just kind of to give you some depth and magnitude to what was happening there. I suppose just extra bits of miscellaneous information. And during that time, Mount Grow would have reformed his family. I know they said that the angels had done a big damage or big hit to the Squid family, but he would have formulated his numbers back up by then. You will also likely have seen during that time, I want to say, during that time, I believe the Convent Rebellion would have also taken place. I'm not going to get too into it, but just for those who know, that is something that would have happened during that time as well. So, just kind of, give a bit of segue into the next bits of knowledge here. But we're going to get right into it here, and I'm going to read off the next bits of information here, which are the last two bits for the Transvoid right here. And that is the birth of the no-named beings. So, the no-named beings, also known as unknawables, are incomprehensible beings that have no clear shape, form, or physiology. We've already talked about this before, but just going over old information, I guess. Excuse me. They have no start or end to them, or their existence. Unknawables are beings with unlimited power and manipulation tactics. Being near them can cause hallucinations, even death for those feeble before their might. They can warp the Transvoid itself with their mind alone, but would rather trick the inhabitants instead into joining and becoming part of their endless being by absorbing them. They come from a place called the Nowhere Lands, a place that lays in the middle of nowhere beyond the Transvoid itself. They suck on and devour the thoughts and conceptual ideas of the Transvoid, which give power to the Unknawables. Their intentions are unknown, as they seem to not care to be on neither side of demons or angels, but rather their own route. So yeah, basically, it goes over the fact that the Unknawables, at least for here, the Transvoid Unknawables, would have come around to being at this time. As we've already talked about before, Unknawables are these higher class level beings and entities. The cosmic essence, as I said before, can tend to make beings on multiple different scales of power at multiple different times. We got Gabriel and Helatori, who before, Gabriel Helatori and Zarla, who were just about nothing at the time before, during the Demon and Angel Scourge, but the cosmic essence would birth them into existence with this immense amount of cosmic essence and power that was far beyond any prior beings to that point. They were very, very mighty, very, very strong indeed. And any beings created by the Transvoid can in fact get to that sort of level like that. I'm going to skimp out on the last bit of information here. I'll talk about Soul. This is because we're talking about the Transvoid. and right now. And yes, well, Soul is considerably a big part of these Soul, not a big part, but he's kind of like the later end half of the Transvoid's history. He's not. He's more like outside of it. To be fair, he doesn't really dabble too much in it. I'd say, like if he was in a book, or whenever he gets in a book about the Transvoid, Transvoid itself, he'd probably be like an ending chapter character, so to speak. It's not the Transvoid focuses on the beings in the Transvoid, not so much outside of the Transvoid itself. But that is the brief history of the Transvoid, basically. It's everything kind of summed up without going into too much detail on the other intersecting things that happen in. We're not going to get too far into Gabriel's history, what he did there, his history with his sister Helatori, or Zarla and what she's been doing as the Archangel up in heaven itself, basically. They're all, we're going to leave that all up to the later half of this video, which talks about the key entities and, what they're all about. Kind of focuses on a little bit of them, but not too much into them. As hey, if you want a video on certain beings and characters, let me know, and I'll see about covering them. But for now, it's just going to be, just tidbits of information about them for now. But yeah, that should be the Transvoid in its entirety. There are a few notable things about it, of course, such as the Witch Hightower, which is this structure in the Transvoid, which, if I'm not mistaken, the Witch Hightower, is one of the few places in the Transvoid that are said to be cursed. That, and also the Temple of Eternal Union is also a place as well. There is a actual pathway in the Transvoid, so like space for us, right? It's like intransversible without a spaceship or a space-like craft. Well, in the Transvoid, you can actually walk through the Transvoid if you so wish. There is a small pathway that leads from the library that you entered the Transvoid in from. There's like a stone pathway that you can use to walk along through it. However, it is, only decent in terms of traverse means, and you will most likely have beings and other entities looking to snack on you or gobble you up if you are caught during going down that pathway by yourself, most likely. Something to also note as well is, I know I mentioned before that concepts exist in the Transvoid. It's not entirely true. In fact, it's almost like not true at all. Transvoid has no concepts that exist in it, like 0.1% of the time. The beings in there are always destroying, always consuming, and always contorting and manipulating everything within their world. In their fiction is a playpen for them, basically. Beings on the low end of the spectrum can destroy things like time, space, what life means, what death means. Beings on the higher end of things, like Helatori, Gabriel, and Zarla, are destroying the concept of existence itself and destroying the very fabrics of the story that they all exist within on the daily basis. And the only reason that it continues to kind of come back every once in a while is because there are beings in there that also, bring things back as well. Creatures like the Hyperwolf always are creating things just basically passively while they exist. There are beings in there that do that. So the entire world of the Transvoid is like this chaotic, like, mess of constant destruction and annihilation, basically. Like, at one point, I believe I stated before that Omni himself has no determinable age, because he has the possibility actual possibility to have been in the Transvoid for an infinite set of time, or to have been in the Transvoid beyond the scope of time itself. So it would canonically make him the eldest brother, but also at the same time the youngest brother as well, because when time ends, he no longer is ageable. He no longer can be concerned by age. But when time restarts all over again, he, basically is the equivalent to like a fetus or an infant. He starts like at 1 second or whatever it is. I'm sure there are, math nerds out there that can kind of go more in depth into that, into Omni's age. I think I've had people who've done that before. But there are, that is an entire conversation on Omni's age for you to discern. But that is something I kind of wanted to leave off on for the transvoid right there. So to move on to the next thing, and I just kind of went off the transvoid because it's the one that we know the most about. But the next one to get into about is, of course, the Book of Hearts is the next one we're going to get into. It is the one we know the least about because we have not paid too much of a visit to it yet. We know a few of the deities and entities that exist within the book, the Book of Eyes, Book of Hearts. Sorry, not Book of Eyes. Book of Hearts. We know entities like the God of the Stars, Alstaria, and the God of Utari, the Jintaro as well also exist there. We know the fifth son of Pain also does exist there as well. And we know that there is a Church of Noon, also known as, the Church of G, as they also call it as well. And there, of course, is the Abbey, the god of music, as well. There are tons of things in here. Something to note, by the way, in the Book of Hearts is that 100 universes can make up a multiverse there. And only 2 multiverses are needed to make up a hyperverse within its ranks. Just a little bit of tidbit information there for you when it comes to that book. There is some knowledge on the Book of Souls as well. Book of Souls is going to be our next one right here. It is the book higher than the Book of Eyes. In terms of beings, like which are stronger, always been up for debate. The Book of Souls, while definitely strong, by stages being stronger and being bigger, quote unquote bigger. The beings in there are also semi-stated to be sluggish, and not as active as the Book of Eye beings. So strength kind of, it fluctuates between the books themselves. At one point, it does stop fluctuating, since from like the Book of Eyes to the Book of Truth no longer becomes a discernible means of saying that, oh yeah, a Book of Eyes character could definitely know. Book of Eyes character would never, ever be capable of beating something like the Inspiration or something like God Uncontested. It's an impossibility. Objective possibility. Apologies about that. 1 second. So we don't have really much information on the structuring of the Book of Souls. We do, however, have plenty of information on some of the notable beings in there. 2 of them we're going to talk about are Cultris and Nugarath, or Nugarath, depending on how you want to say it. Cultris is one of the higher end beings in the book, and I'm probably going to botch this when I say it. Their real name is called Cultrisva Vermira. I completely botched that, probably. The entity, Cultris, is known to walk the boundless realms of this world like nothing. It's even said to have had a hand in the creation of a world that, even described by him himself, apparently makes Eden look like a joke. Again, not getting too much into Eden stuff, but it is called the Absolute World. It's a structure that exists in the Book of Minds that Cultris had a hand in creating. With? Won't really know too much about that till later, probably. Let's see if it's brought up. Cultris is also known as the Amber Queen or God of Amber, as their hair is said to be like this very, very definable gold-like color, like the purest of amber you would ever see, basically. They also are basically like the Night Omni power within the book itself, the Book of Souls itself. Like their power is so discernible from everyone else, is pretty much considered nigh omnipotent in terms of their power when compared to the rest of the entities within the Book of Souls. Nugarath is Nugarath, depending on how you want to say it again, is one of the few beings in their set that has bested another being from another book, that being the Book of Minds, to which he bested the entity known as Judas. Once again, that brings in the fluctuation of power between the two books, kind of letting you know that some books and some entities can in fact outrank or outdo one another in some aspects, but not always going to be the case. Not always the case. That is, I think, all the information I have on the Book of Souls for now. To get into the Book of Minds, though, which is one book we do have a good amount of information on, is what we're going to be hopping into next. So let's go ahead and jump right into the depths of the Book of Minds. So, to delve into the Book of Minds in the first place, you have to get past several layers that encompass around it, in a sense. I'm not going to get too much into the layers, as it is like a lot of, some of it is mainly just, a bit of power scaling is involved in them, but they are discernibly, do have story-based reasons for existing as well. The creation of the Book of Minds, though, is, of course, like I said before, done to by the One in Red. I know what the One in Red is. Basically, is a pretty famous entity between all the books. He, travels around quite a bit. He is one of the more stronger entities within the verse. I see in terms of like the mid to high tier, probably, if you want to kind of stretch it as well. He is as old as the real Eden tree, or not as old, but discernibly close, as he does state that both him and the real Eden tree are, rather close in age, to a point to where it doesn't matter, who may or may not be older than the other, but they are rather close in age. Another entity that is, of course, notable in the books as well is Iris, the Bleeding Angel. Iris, the Bleeding Angel, is a soldier champion. Could call her also just like a partner to the One in Red, either or. She is basically like one of the greatest fighters in the verse that is known. At least one of the best female fighters in the verse for sure. And she has faced off against a ton of adversaries. Casually, of course, squares up against the eldest sons of Pain. She casually fights against Eden's main forces as well, and has even been one of the occupants of the Book of Minds itself, known as the Herald, who created the Tree of Virtue, which when we get to the Herald, you will find out just how insane of a feat that is all on its own. There are a plethora of beings that exist within the Book of Minds. There are ones such as Newfamir, I believe is his name as well. There is, of course, the Herald. There is Judas as well. But we're going to focus, since we're getting close to that hour length mark, we're going to focus on the big three, or maybe big four, depending on how you see it, of the Book of Minds. The first one, of course, being, excuse me, so I didn't mean to burp again, the Inspiration. The Inspiration is a massive, quote-unquote, massive entity, as he is quite literally beyond size and measurement entirely. He is so massive, in fact, that he looks out upon the entirety of, not the verse itself, but the Pantheon, in a sense, depending if you take Pantheon as being the verse, or Pantheon as being the Eden Pantheon, but looks upon it in its entirety, and has even gobbled it up once before. It is, I believe, also has its domain toward the absolute world as well as the rest of the Book of Minds being its place. It has two minds, I believe, one of them being Judas and the other being the Herald. They both work in tandem in aiding it, basically. One of them, they both basically act as champions to the Inspiration, just like how Iris also acts as a champion to the one in red, essentially. The last being, the one probably we don't know the most about, is the false prophet. They essentially are like the head of the big three in a sense, but also I believe operates entirely in the absolute world with no contenders to its name. Next up, we have the final member of the big three of the Book of Minds. It's where the highest of the highest realm at, and is the strongest entity accumulating throughout all the books of Eden, essentially. It is none other than the Prime Mover, or TPM is also what it is called, but the Prime Mover is its name. Now, the Prime Mover is the curator of the cosmic essence. And depending if you fall into the theory that the cosmic essence had the Prime Mover make itself, or that the Prime Mover made the cosmic essence, entirely up to you. But the Prime Mover is an ontological, purely ontological force. Ontological. Oh my goodness, what is that word called? Ontological force, essentially, along with a multitude of other things as well. But they are ultimately the head ruler of all the books of Eden. Not as king or god, but just as the thing that basically they all fall back on. The Prime Mover, as I said, is basically the ruler of the cosmic essence in some shape or form. They do not, however, control it to a degree to where they can basically do or say whatever they want, and it follows their whim and will. But they are, in fact, like a sort of father-esque figure to it. They hold the cosmic essence in high priority. It is not a being that is entirely incomprehensible, but they do, in fact, operate on a higher level of thinking, higher level of speaking, higher level of language, and etc. That keeps them from being entirely estimated or measured in the eyes of lesser beings, take like folklore, for example, for that matter. All right. I think that has covered it. We have went through a multitude of beings, a multitude of history, and etc. onward. Now, this is probably going to be, oh my goodness, what time is it? Fucking hour and 4 minutes. We've been on this thing for an hour and 4 minutes, and I'm still not even finished just yet, because now we had to talk about some theoretical books that may exist out there in Eden. Now, obviously, these has never been confirmed to exist, nor do I think they will be. We know for a fact that there are theoretical books out in Eden that are said to exist. Some of them are much different than the regular books. These books act as cosmologies. Like DC or Marvel, that's what these things are. They're basically like their own fictions. The other books act more like their own, they can act like their own realm, so to speak, pseudo realm, but they are more like tomes of knowledge, things that you look into to gain further insight into something. That's basically what they are. So some books that we know of that are like this is the Book of Truth, the Book of Atrocities, and of course the Book of Void, also known as the Tome of Void, which is start at the beginning. The Book of Atrocities, we know, is basically not super hell, quote unquote, but is basically, in a sense, is like hell. It's like Dante's Inferno type hell, like shit. That's a good way to put it. It delves into a lot of the philosophical and theoretical aspects of Alpha Tale, talking about the good in the world. It dissects it, dismantles it, talks about how even doing something as simple as giving a homeless person an apple would make you into a martyr, a villain, a cruel sinner. Book of Atrocities is a place that twists good logic in exchange for making you into a villain. There's more to it than that, of course, but that is the main concept for it that I can kind of go off of. The ruler of the Book of Atrocities, of course, is one of the big three of mankind, and that is evil. Also sometimes called the conduit of evil. They are a highly powerful entity or humanoid person. I won't go too much into them, as I have a feeling we will probably go into evil further in another video explaining the Alpha Tail Mythos. You know, maybe going into something like delving into like the philosophy between like Alpha Tail stuff like that, possibly. But I won't delve too far into it. And hopefully by then I will have better structuring for how to do these videos. This is my first like big Mythos explained storyline. Anyway, second, Book of Truth. It is not much of a realm, as it is like it's hard to say because it's like it's paradoxical and contradictory in itself as well. It is kind of hard to say. There's no place in it. There's no worlds. There's no structures. No cosmology. There are beings that exist in there for sure, but they all basically exist as part of the being known as truth, in a sense. And they have their own personalities. They have their own, concepts to them. Some ones to kind of name off real quick are, of course, such as T is an entity to name off. There is God Uncontested, and there is the Devil Undefeated as well. Those are three notable entities that exist in the Book of Truth. They are definitely on the higher end tier in terms of beings that have been shown in the series itself. They are very powerful. They do not operate on the logic or power system of the Alphaverse as a whole. They do not rely on cosmic essence or nexus power, just like everything else in the Book of Truth doesn't do as well. There are other beings as well, notable there as well, but I won't get too far into it because I have a feeling we will, again, like I said before, for a shit ton of times in this video, we will probably have another explained video going over just, just what goes on in this book and other ones like it. So there's no reason for me to go too far into it. The Book of Void. The Book of Void, never been found. There's almost like little to no information about it. It is theorized to basically be a book of the void itself, which, if you don't know, I guess it's kind of supposed to might as well talk about it. We talked about voids a few times in here. Never delved too far into it, so I guess I'll kind of give you a bit of a tidbit information about it. The absolute void is the bedrock of the verse. There's nothing else beneath it. The absolute void is about as pure void as it gets. It has never been described to be like the dead brain of God himself or whatever. I don't know what people say about it, but it is the bedrock of the verse. It's beneath Eden. It's beneath the Twilight realm. It's even beneath the spirit realm itself. Everything that touches the absolute void doesn't die. It doesn't no longer exist. It basically is just like much deeper than that. It's hard to describe, basically, but there are realms that get rid of things. There are realms that erase things. There are realms that unmake things. The absolute void does something far greater, far deeper than that, and there's a reason why people don't go there. There's a reason why people fear its spreading in the first place. But we're not going to delve too far into it, as I have a feeling we will probably talk more about the absolute void in a video talking about the Eden world itself, and everything about that as well. But that is kind of like a little sum up of the astral void in a sense, not going into any entities or so that exist in it. Well, I believe that should cover it for most of the Book of Mind stuff, most of Book of Mind, Book of Eden stuff. I don't believe I missed anything. I believe I went over a good assortment of history around the books. Oh, I guess I should also mention the Books of Eden don't fuck with or don't mess with anything that goes on in the Eden Pantheon. Do they help from time to time? Of course they do, but they really are just their own surrogate cosmology. They do their own thing. They have their own stories that go on, just like the Alphaverse. Essentially, the Alphaverse doesn't interact with Eden overly. Once it's done that, and it ended everything. Not to say that, them interacting with it ended the world. The world's already ending. My point being is that, hardly ever do things in other orbs or realities or Eden orbs or whatever interact with anything going on in Eden, because Eden by itself is like its own fictional verse in itself, which kind of goes to say for like a lot of things in here. Basically, they have their own like fictional worlds, universes, stars, multiverses, that kind of stuff. So there's no reason for them to exit out of those places just to go and interact with something much bigger, expansive, and mightier than itself, basically. But yeah, that is gonna sum it up. Oh wait, there's also one other thing as well. The Ultimate Singularity. I forgot to mention that. The Ultimate Singularity from the Book of Minds is basically like this massive transporting gateway that can like basically take you throughout not all of Eden, no, but all throughout the books, basically. It kills gods and kills lesser beings sometimes when they pass through it. It is an omnipresent force, and I don't believe it's thinking. I don't believe it even acts. It just kind of does things. It exists in just about every aspect of the books in their own variants of timelines, own variants of existences. They exist constantly. It's like an absolute certainty. If I'm thinking of it right. But yes, I believe that should be the end of it all. Oh, wait, one more thing as well. Each book kind of has its own side effects to it. I believe the book of Hearts is perfectly fine to walk through. The Book of Eyes can cause you to hallucinate, cause you to go mad, and if you don't eat anything in there, you will straight up lose your sanity. I don't believe the Book of Souls. I believe the Book of Souls was said to require you to have a barrier in it because it's basically eating itself, from what I can remember. Don't quote me on that. Best to go read it yourself. But I believe that is the case. The Book of Minds seems relatively safe for the time being. It's basically just you getting past the first 7 layers, and then you're good. Basically, is what I catch. Yeah, I believe that is everything. If I, like always, if I got any information wrong or I missed anything, feel free to comment down below. This whole series is a collaborative effort. We always want to make sure we're all, insightful, that we know what's going on. We know, who knows what, who's doing what properly, all the X, Y, and Z stuff. This video is very much a kind of mythos explained video. You got some information. It's just here to kind of sum up some of the things that are in the verse of Alphatil itself. This was all about the books of Eden. You got to learn some stuff about beings, how they're made, what they are, what they can kind of do, X, Y, and Z, all that other notable information. If you want another one of these, please do let me know. I am always willing to do these videos, and I have tons of fun doing recordings for you guys and seeing you guys comment down below like your theories and what you want to know, what's he gonna talk about next, all that other stuff. So yeah, hope you had a wonderful time. I know I did. Let me know if this video was a W or L. Comment down below. Put down your favorite part of this video, what you enjoyed the most, what you would like to know more about. And yeah, I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.